Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for this webinar. Before we begin, allow me to very quickly introduce myself. My name is Melissa Idris. I am a senior editor and anchor here at Astro AWANI, where I host a couple of talk shows. One is a news talk show called Consider This. The other is one that's very close to my heart. It's called The Future's Female. It is really about highlighting, showcasing women who are doing extraordinary things. And that's why I'm so delighted to be part of this event today, this webinar, a collaboration between LINC Astro AWANI and the Malaysian AIDS Foundation and Yayasan Saim Darby. Really, the idea is to kind of keep the conversation going, the celebration going for International Women's Day. Because as you know, the work of closing the gap of gender inequality, of correcting biases, of increasing leadership by women at every level and in every field, all of that requires commitment all year round, not just on one day in the month of March. So it is an absolute honor and pleasure for me to be here today and to introduce to you this incredible group of women who are each passionate about improving gender equity in their respective fields. So let me introduce the speakers. As I introduce you, please turn on your cameras and mics. And I'm going to begin with Professor Dr. Adiba Kamarul-Zaman, Professor of Medicine and Infectious Diseases at University Malaya. She was Dean of Medicine there from 2011 to 2019. Currently the president of the International AIDS Society, which is the world's largest association of HIV professionals. And I could go on. She's a member of the WHO Science Council, adjunct associate professor at Yale University. It is an honor and pleasure to welcome her to this panel, Dr. Adiba. All right,
morning,
moving on,
Melissa.
we have, good morning. We have Dr. Yatila Zainal Abidin, CEO of Yayasan Saim Darby or Saim Darby Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of Saim Darby. And she's been in this role for more than 12 years, really kind of doing the long-term work with the foundation's partners to help achieve zeros, zero poverty, zero hunger, zero AIDS, zero discrimination against women and girls. So we welcome her to the panel, Dr. Yatila.
Thanks, Melissa.
Next, Puan Nurlila Mokhtar, founder and chair of Persatuan Wahidaya Malaysia Pemahim, which is the only Malaysian network of women living with HIV. She's also the chair of the International Community of Women Living with HIV Asia Pacific since 2015, a tireless advocate, trainer, community leader, working to advance the rights of sexual reproductive health, but also to improve the lives of other women living with HIV. She herself has been living with HIV for more than 2 decades now. It's a pleasure to welcome her, Puan Nurlila.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa.
Last but not least, Dr. Imelda Balchin, consultant in obstetrics and gynecology, a subspecialist in maternal fetal medicine for high-risk pregnancies with a special interest in prevention of premature births. Dr. Imelda is essentially now a household name, thanks to her dedication in advocating for women's health on social media, and also her TV show, Tanya Dr. Imelda. In 2018, she was awarded Best Health Advocate on Social Media by the Ministry of Health. So welcome, Dr. Imelda, rounding up this incredible panel of women today. And folks, I know that many of you watching will have questions for our panelists, just as I do. So I'm going to open it up for questions right at the start, right now. I'm going to be taking them throughout the next hour. I'm going to be incorporating them into our conversation. Let's not leave it till the end where we might not have enough time. Go ahead, type in your questions into that Q&A box, and don't forget to mention your name and who you'd like to direct your question to. Okay, let me kick things off with a question of my own. And I want to kind of begin with a diagnosis of, say, the situation, of how perhaps things have improved in terms of women's voices being heard, women's voices being represented, particularly when decisions are being made, decisions that directly or indirectly impact women's lives. Dr. Adiba, may I begin with you? In the realm of public health, and not just in your work dealing with the HIV epidemic, but also in your involvement in the various COVID-19 task force that you are on. How often do you find yourself the only woman at the table?
Okay, let me start with the HIV/AIDS. My experience with HIV/AIDS first. Since this was constructed in that manner, I have to say the HIV/AIDS movement, particularly the International AIDS Society, we are very, very conscious of being diverse. It stems from the original HIV response, which wanted to make sure that people living with HIV are part of the solution. So there is this thing called the GPAR principle, greater involvement of people living with AIDS, from way back, in 4 decades ago. And there's a slogan, leaving no one behind, particularly those who are vulnerable and marginalized, to be part of the conversation, part of the solution. So as a result of that, through the years, we must, in fact, if you go to any international, regional, or international level committee, it's a very conscious thing. I'm currently chairing the next AIDS conference in Montreal. And we were just looking through, even in the programs, you will almost never see, in at least the IAS programs, International AIDS Society programs, manuals, right? We make sure that the programs reflect regions, reflect gender, reflect north, south, etc. So that's the HIV movement, very, very respectful of diversity in all its form. When it comes to maybe not so much COVID, but at least when I was dean, I was often the only, for the longest time, I was the only female dean, and I felt very isolated, I think. So in academia, it's still an issue, I believe. Although, having said that, at at one point we had female vice chancellors and deputy vice chancellors and female deans. But overall, I think it's still an issue. Yeah, not so much in the COVID response, because there's lots of female doctors and leaders.
Okay, that's encouraging to hear that there is, a kind of concerted effort, particularly in the HIV movement, to have the diversity in voices. Maybe academia still needs to catch up on that front.
Absolutely.
If I may move on to Dr. Yatila, over the years, are you seeing, personally, your own observations? Are you seeing more women now directly involved in decision making? And I'm just wondering what that difference has made, having more women at the table.
So aside from the gender equality agenda towards women and girls everywhere having equal rights and opportunities to be able to live free of discrimination, that's what Yayasan Saim Dabi focuses on, which is integral to all dimensions of inclusive and sustainable development. Having more women up there is beneficial for the organizations themselves. So I'll give you some examples. The Institute of Corporate Directors Malaysia did a little bit of research, highlighted that companies with boards with at least 1/3 women representation correlates with 38% higher median return on equity as compared to companies with boards that have no women representation whatsoever. Another study shows that companies' financial performances correlate to the number of women on their boards, which means that the more diverse the board is, the better the company performs financially. Now, in all 3 Saim Dabi companies, Saim Dabi Berhad, Saim Dabi Plantation Berhad, Saim Dabi Property Berhad, as well as in Yayasan Saim Dabi, we have achieved that 30% women representation on our boards. But now, the 30% Club Malaysia reported that women representation on the top 100 public listed boards in 2021 was about 26%. 4% off the mark. However, it was also recently reported that the 900 over public listed companies on Bursa only have about 17% of women representation on their boards and senior management, which indicates that we still have a long way to go. But I personally confident that the situation will exponentially improve as there is so much more awareness on the subject matter and of its importance and benefits to companies and organizations. More and more companies are aware that it is crucial for them to have a balanced board and senior management composition to ensure resilience and sustainability of their businesses and their operations, and proactive measures will be taken towards this. It is so different than it was 20 years ago, Amisa, when I was just starting off, when I experienced first-hand discrimination because of my gender and with a hijab on, and the fact that I was giving birth during the early years, the early part of my career. Times have certainly changed. For example, I was appointed as the first CEO of Yayasan Saim Dabi in 2010, based totally on merit.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. I'm glad that things have changed. You're absolutely right. Studies have shown that boards with more diversity do better financially as well, and also morale as well. But there's still work to do. I'll come back to this conversation about the work that needs to be done. But I want to move on to perhaps Dr. Imelda. We had just heard Dr. Yatila give the statistics for the number of women in the board level senior management, but it's really not just about the number of women represented at the top table. It's whether or not those decisions are being made that reflect the considerations for women's lives, women's lived realities, the real inequalities that women face. I'm wondering what your observations are. Where are you seeing the most positive change when it comes to having women represented?
Well, you may think my point of view is slightly different, but I'm just giving you my observation. Okay, if you want to have men and women in top positions, then you cannot look at them as individual men or individual women. You must look at them as people with families, with baggage that came along with them. So, if traditionally, when you appoint a man in a leadership position, what you get is a free woman behind the scenes who are actually managing the chaos, all the chaos in the family life. So you must, think about it that the organizations are not actually paying the woman. They're getting free manpower. They're actually getting free manpower to be a PA for the man without being paid so that he could focus on a job. But if you appointed a woman as leader, traditionally, do you actually expect the woman to do the job and also handle the family chaos? That means, it's not about a woman cannot be good leaders. It's because you're actually making them do two jobs. So that's a big difference. But today, we've moved on. We are in a different world today than we were yesterday. Today, we have equal men and women in the workforce. So you are going to find that if you appointed a man in a leadership role, he is more likely to have a career-driven wife, right? So, he is not going to be able to perform as we did traditionally when you appointed a man in a leadership role years ago. This time around, things have changed. Men are also expected to be there for their children. Men they want that role to be more hands-on with their children, and they want their paternity leave. And, things have changed. What men want are also different. We got to think about it in different ways, in that organizations must appoint people with families as top leadership positions, and they must be able to provide with the needs of people with families as leaders. So the positive change that has happened now is that COVID has happened. So we are more decentralized. So what has happened is that more women will be able to take on this role in a leadership position, because we have learned that people can work from home, people can work from anywhere. Professor Dato Adiba is actually not in Malaysia at the moment, but she's with us. She's with us with a webinar, inspiring women that we can do this. And so we can do this. There is no need anymore to make people travel to work for long hours to do the jobs if you could do the job from home. And that can help change organizations in allowing more women to take on the role as leadership and think about provisions for family. Because equally, men need to be family men. This world is very different. And that is why we need to have more women in a leadership role with men.
All right, definitely the, I guess, importance of having men as part of the conversation as well. But you're right, I mean, there's been silver linings to this pandemic, one of which has been the real, like, it's been highlighted the unequal care work that happens in the household and the double burden that working women face sometimes when it comes to having to shoulder the household burden and work burden. So perhaps that's come to light. Perhaps we can address it a little more, work towards that equality goal that we have. Can I come to Puan Nurlila? And I want to ask about your experience, because you're so passionate about coaching an entire generation of women who will become community leaders in their own right for people living with HIV and AIDS. And I'm just wondering where you see that importance of correcting the gender inequality, why it's important to have gender equality and more women in leadership to be included in decisions that will guide policies and programs on HIV.
So to talk about, we say about when you want to do something about us, women living with HIV, you must include us. So this is the thing that, I bring, and I try my best, my very best to bring the issues of women living with HIV in Malaysia. I remember in one, like 10 years back in a seminar where I openly asked, where is the program or the program for women living with HIV? But the answer, the panelists answer, the percentage of women is only this amount. So I was so, I'm so very, rasa sangat marah masa tu, because are you waiting for the woman to be infected by HIV 50%? So only you will do something about it. So this is the issues that bring me to go to leave my work at Felda. I was working with Felda before now, and I work with MEC. During I work with Malaysia councils, I bring all the issues of women into MEC, not just using the women for funding, but making sure funding are for women, especially in empowering them to be leaders, as I have been trained as leaders.
Right. Dr. Adiba, just to kind of follow up on what Puan Nurlila was talking about, if I understand correctly, women are more biologically susceptible. There's a biological susceptibility to HIV, but there's also the way HIV disproportionately affects women because of cultural and social and economic inequalities. I'm just wondering why that's important then to have the women's voice as part of as you said, as part of the kind of HIV movement in the HIV response. And I'm thinking about the way that Malaysia has actually eliminated mother-to-child transmission. And that's, in a way, responding to the needs of women and how HIV affects women specifically.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Obviously, biologically, women are more vulnerable, but culturally, as you mentioned, there's this gender sort of power imbalance, right? Going back to something as simple as, well, maybe not so simple, but condom negotiation. In the days when we had nothing but condom to prevent HIV, whether you're in you're married to a male person, or worse still, if you're a sex worker, to insist that your male partner wears a condom. I hope it's okay to say condom on Astro AWANI.
Yes,
it never used to be. I'm getting you into trouble.
It's fine. It's about sexual reproductive health. It's important.
Okay, all right. Oops, sorry. It is 3:30. It's 4:00 in the morning. Yeah. So yeah, negotiating something as, I don't think I'm exaggerating, that could be potentially life-threatening. In the days before there was treatment and pre-exposure prophylaxis, that was a real issue, right? Getting the male partners to put on a condom because of this gender power imbalance. So I can't be more a greater example of that gender disparity than condom negotiation between men and women.
Understood. And it really is, I think that you're right about the power imbalance, but also by I guess education, awareness of sexual reproductive rights and consent and all the rights that come with women, that also I think helps the conversation.
Sorry to interrupt, but also touching on what Imelda said, let's say there are two, that both husband and wife are living with HIV. More often than not, and perhaps this is not just in Malaysia, but particularly in countries where that gender disparity is stronger, then often, the men come forward for treatment and the women may not, because the stigma and discrimination on women tend to be even greater than that of men. So coming forward for prevention, coming forward for treatment can be also a big issue.
But Nolila, do you agree that the stigma is more for women than compared to men?
Yes, I will much agree upon it, because when there is a one, I just give an example, premarital testing for Muslim couples. If you are a woman living with HIV, or you've been diagnosed while you going through that premarital testing, then the man will not marry you. But if you are a man, being diagnosed there, or, be known HIV status while before the marriage, in the premarital testing, usually the woman say yes to the marriage. And it is, the woman, bear more on the issues of, if to say men and women in terms of being stigmatized, and the power of, especially as what Dr. Adiba say, in terms of treatment, how men are more, going forward for treatment, and then we are left behind. We don't have the voice to speak on. That is why we need more people, women coming out and be empowered. They should know their rights to get their treatment, even though you are a wife.
Okay, wonderful. I guess that really shows the importance of the need for gender equality and women's leadership in the HIV response. I'm going to take a few questions now because they're coming in hard and fast. So let's address the question from Milad from Malay Mail. And the first question is to do with the aim to have 30% women in leadership in Malaysia goes back at least 2 decades, yet we're still aiming to achieve the same goal. And if that's excuse me, sorry, let me just say that. Okay, so what causes the delay and what are the factors from the social acceptance point of view? And let's have a quick discussion. Maybe Dr. Yatila, maybe you can address this. I mean, I'm going to combine Milad's question with another question, with the same, another question. Means if that is the case, then why only aim for 30% and not 50% of women in leadership? Dr. Yatila, would you like to address?
Okay, now I'd like to come back to what Malaysia is doing right now. The government, what they are doing right now is they're on the right path with the requirement for all listed companies to have at least one board member, right, by January 2023. And senior management. But I think that you will agree with me that the requirement should be increased to 1/3 of the women board representation. And you're talking about 50%, yeah? Now, I'd like to give you an extreme example. In Norway, in 2003, the Norwegian government passed a law that requires companies to have at least 40%, yeah, of their board members to be women. Now, since 2006, Norway implemented dramatic regulatory measures for non-compliance. And after an initial grace period of 2 years for existing companies, a failure to achieve 40% quota would lead to the company being delisted. Yeah. Of course, there was great initial backlash, as you can imagine, but now the quota law has largely become a non-issue in Norway. So what I feel is that we're just concerned of ruffling feathers, and we're just concerned about taking that big step. But I feel personally that this big step needs to be taken and feathers need to be ruffled before things can happen. But then again, we have to be careful. We must be careful that this will not result in tokenism with all these requirements, etc., 50%, you know. But now I'd like to highlight that women board members, women management contribute to the organization because of their unique skills and experiences. But however, if they are made to feel that their presence is only to make up the numbers required by regulatory bodies and external stakeholders, they may then tend to undervalue their own skills, achievements, and their experiences, which demeans their potential contribution to the organizations. And this would be a pity because after all, very careful selection processes would have to be carried out to choose them, yeah, to be a board member or a part of the senior management. And they'll be found to be the right person for the job. So, but we're just concerned about all these backlash and how it's going to be treated if it's going to be something, you know, a quota which is put there by the government.
I agree with Dr. Yatila, but I also want to just share with you some of my own personal observations. Is that one thing that will help us get to our goal is to have men to support us. We don't want to accuse men as being sexist because that will put them in a defensive mode. And when men are in the defensive mode, that doesn't help women rise. And we want men to be able to work with women. And if we put women in leadership roles, then they must be able to work with men. And so let me give you an example. When I was a junior doctor, I was performing very well in laparoscopic surgery. That's minimal access surgery, using small, tiny pots, using just just as big as an eyebrow liner, which is smaller than a pencil, inserted into 3 points in an abdomen to perform surgery to remove structures, unwanted structures like a fibroid or a cyst or even cancer from the abdomen without making a big abdominal incision. And we watch the camera through the ports and we're able to perform that surgery. Now that's a male-dominated field because in the past, majority of surgeons were doctors. But institutions are not there yet to help our women develop our skills. I was very good at it. I was so good at it that senior doctors who were mailbox bosses really actually appointed me to lead a minimal access surgery list on my own because I could do the job. Now, the problem was the instruments were designed for big hands. They're designed for men. And I was, I'm just somebody with tiny hands and tiny fingers. Mm-hmm. It's a struggle. I was very good at it, but I was struggling. Every day I came home with sore arms, sore fingers, very difficult because I need to reach longer pedals, which my fingers couldn't grasp. I had to find different ways of doing it. And therefore the positions hurt me every day. Now I decided that laparoscopic surgery and becoming a gynecological cancer surgeon is not for me because it hurt me so much. I was good at it and I had to move on to a different role. And I found that by doing minimal access surgery, I became good with hand-eye coordination because I practiced doing that. I became very good in obstetric ultrasound and fetal medicine, where you need to learn to scan with your left hand and do procedures with your right hand, or scan with your right hand and do procedures with your left hand. So now I'm a maternal and fetal medicine subspecialist rather than a gynae-oncological subspecialist surgeon. Right. Because the institution is really not there yet. The men around me are very supportive. The men around me are not sexist, but the institution has not caught up with provision of what would help women rise. It's being the opportunity to do the job means you got to get the instruments that will fit women's hands. And so
it's almost so pragmatic, the solution, right? You got instruments that actually fit for that, change the workplace to actually fit women as opposed to excluding them. Okay, that's a wonderful story. Yeah.
My whole point is that men do support women, because the fact that you're a leader means you want to encourage people to do the job well, regardless of gender, regardless of age. If you are a true leader, then you are not gender biased. And we find that there are many men leaders out there who do support women, but the institution has not caught up. So we got to get the institutions to catch up first to make the work environment suitable for women.
Okay, so the question is, how do we get institutions to change if there aren't enough women leading those institutions? And okay, so
exactly.
it is quite a cycle. It's quite a cycle that we need to break here. And I'm going to take a few questions and comments that have come up. And maybe let me get Dr. Adiba to address them, because some of the theme that I'm seeing in terms of comments has to do with the quota of this 30% representation, also the idea of tokenism. And sometimes, more often than not, whenever I'm talking about the topic of merit and quotas and tokenism, there often seems to be this framing of attaching women to powerful men. Oh, she got the job because of her father, because of her connections, of family connections, because of her husband. I find that seems to almost always frame the conversation when it comes to women in leadership positions. But let's talk about that and work through this idea of tokenism. Dr. Adiba, how can we ensure that women are ready and equipped and are, when they find themselves given the opportunity to be in a leadership position, that they are there and they deserve it and that they can do it? There is a process to ensuring that women are ready for the role.
So, Melissa, before I answer you directly on the readiness, on how to make sure that's ready, I think, one of the biggest problems in Malaysia is the lack of child and elderly care, actually, that sort of prohibits many women from going forward. As you know, in many medical schools in Malaysia, the balance can tip into more girls, more women joining medical school. But as they progress, fewer enter into sort of specialty training and leadership. And part of that problem is, the need to go for postgraduate training also coincides with the time when your biological clock is running out. And I see my younger doctors struggling, trying to balance childcare and elderly care, studying for exams, being on call, and all of that. So I think if we forget about having women on boards, but even to advance in a career when they're at their most, going back to Imelda as an obstetrician, she'll know this, when they, desperately need to start a family and nurture that family, etc. So there's this collision at the time, just when many of us are advancing in our careers. So having that support, whether it's spousal support, parental support, in-law support, and of course, governmental support in providing childcare, affordable childcare is crucial before you even talk about women at board level. And at board level, I find it insulting that, why are we saying that only women are on boards because of who they are? Because, they're so-and-so's daughter or so-and-so's wife. It equally happens to men, right? In fact, probably more, because you went to the same school, because you played golf together. So I find that rather insulting. But at the same time, like what Dr. Yatela said, it should be on merit, both for men and for women. Yes, because of that big imbalance now, we need to have some kind of quota, but over and above, it should be about merit.
Can I get one of the panelists to comment then? If it means making sure that women are in leadership positions on merit, it also means grooming or preparing them for the role. Often opportunities like that tend to fall on the wayside through a myriad of factors. Dr. Adiba mentioned childcare and parental care. All the care burden at home is a factor, but also there is also a bias factor in the workplace. There is a human tendency to gravitate to people who are like yourself, if you are a powerful man, to sponsor and advocate for other men when leadership opportunity arises or leadership building opportunity arises. So what happens is that there are many capable women at the middle management level that perhaps do not get the opportunity to rise up the ranks. Let's perhaps get Dr. Yatela to weigh in. What do you think about this kind of stuck in the middle band?
There should be accountability on organizations so that everyone are given equal opportunities in the workplace or in the organizations, everyone, everywhere. And in order for us to go towards that goal in throughout the whole organization, women working in male-dominated industries require these kinds of support, which is institutionalized not only with the men, but with the women within. And flexibility that promotes an inclusive working environment. Dr. Imelda mentioned about work from home arrangements, and Prof. Adiba mentioned about daycare centers and then having them at workplaces, lactation rooms for nursing mothers. When I was during that session, there weren't any. Only after I finished my kids were besar, then only lactation rooms appeared. And then also you have to focus on leadership development and career mentorship programs, establishment of gender policies, and ensuring of a safer environment, like sexual harassment policies to eliminate sexual harassment at the workplaces to make everyone feel safe. And I'd like to also share an example with you. I'm proud to share that in 2019, Saim Dabi Plantation Berhad launched the Female Management Development Program. Just imagine, a groundbreaking initiative in the palm oil industry, possibly the first of its kind in the global oil palm industry, to promote equal rights at the workplace and support potential women leaders. These participants, as you said, biasness all around them. They were hesitant at the beginning, but eventually transformed their careers after attending coaching sessions, being assigned with special projects, to build their confidence, and then having job rotations for exposure and placements here and there, provided with formal trainings, workshops, seminars. Today, I'm very proud to see the career growth of 38 female estate and male assistants and managers nationwide. You just imagine that in such a strong dominated industry for men. And I'd like to touch about how funny it is that female students make up more than half of universities enrollment in Malaysia, but females are absent from many leadership and decision-making positions. Is one of the reasons because we do not have enough women participating in STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We believe that capacity building opportunities is key to increasing women's participation in STEM. Yeah, a 2021 UNESCO science report states that women still represent just 33%, just over 33% of researchers globally, and their work rarely gains the recognition it deserves. So we support world-class scientific research to translate results into action, and developing these highly capable local scientists and researchers and custodians with many opportunities given to women as lead researchers, and they just blow us away. For example, our partnership with the Management Ecology of Malaysian Elephants has been supporting women researchers of impressive caliber, already 9 so far, leading the National Initiative for Human-Elephant Coexistence Management, for example.
But that's really wonderful. I mean, I've been following your work, and I have to say there is real change, and I'm seeing these women come front and center. I'm seeing them blossom and grow, particularly in the fields of sustainability. And I will echo a lot of the comments on the chat. Dato Tarsia Zunur Shalikwa all saying bravo, congratulations on this, because this corporate support is important to make sure that civil organizations continue with the good work that they're doing on the ground. So congratulations, Asaim. Can I come to Puan Nordela, because I want to continue this conversation about leadership in the civil society sector, right? You currently chair the International Community for Women Living with HIV in Asia Pacific. And I wanted to ask you, that is a big leadership role, one that you perhaps had to kind of take the mantle up. And I'm wondering what you would have liked to make that environment more enabling for other women to also take up leadership in the civil society arena. Puan Nordela, you're muted. Okay.
You represent Asia Pacific is a big it's a bigger thing for me. Because Asia Pacific, Malaysia is just a small country. To represent India, to represent China, and the rest of the unique country like Indonesia, Thailand. But to have more women to speak on the issues of HIV is not that easy also. Language is a barrier. Stigma is a barrier. And lack of our funding given for the women to be empowered in order to represent issues of women living with HIV in the globe as globally. Because I also speak for the Asia Pacific in globally. So we I can share the stories of how I brought up to be a leader, because Prof. Adiba started it. He started with a training for about 30 women in Malaysia in year 2006, and then these women, they all go and they work with their own NGOs and work under MAC as a leader. And because of my knowledge, my language, I can speak English a little bit. I was sent overseas. I was sent internationally to learn about laws, to learn about leadership. So if this opportunity is given to more women, then the representative of women will be more stronger in terms of HIV response. Thank you.
Thanks, Puan Nordela. And thank you, Dr. Adiba, for doing that. 16 years ago, you helped build capacity in community leaders dealing with to kind of build capacity within people living with HIV, and 16 years later we have Panurlila talking on an international stage, advocating for the rights of people living with HIV. So thank you for that.
Of course,
for your
we
work
women
then.
must lift up other women, as they say. If not, who else will do it for us, right?
Absolutely. And that brings me to Milad's question, saying that it's often said that women support women and lift them up. Do you agree with the statement? And what have you done to support women who are in lower positions so they can uplift themselves? That is an example of what you did to help women uplift themselves. Another question by Milad, and I'm going to ask Dr. Imelda to address this, if I may. Milad says that ultimately women's opinions really counted in the conversation, or is it still being taken as women being women and women talking too much? And have you encountered this situation? And and if yes, what is being done, or what have you done to change the perception?
Well, women's perception counts because women are mothers, sisters, daughters, and wives. And so if you can take an example of my Facebook page of more than 500 million followers, I mainly advocate health for women. And yet you can find that many of my followers are actually men, because they actually care what women think. They actually care for women's health. They care for their mothers. They care for their wives. They care for their daughters, and they care for their sisters. And so actually, it is wrong to think that men do not think of women's opinion as important. It's actually quite biased to think that way, because I find that a lot of open-minded men out there do think about what women have to say, and the role that women play in their lives are actually very important. That, maybe it's not out there yet, but, there's a lot of input. For me to give you one very simple explanation of how women's opinion actually makes a difference in their lives, is that have a look at difference between gender in smoking. That's also inequality for health there, isn't it? Because if you look at statistics, less than 2% of Malaysian women are smokers, but almost half of all men are smokers in Malaysia. So that statistics tells us there's a gender difference in how people respond to daily stresses in their lives. So men who smoke are telling us they need to smoke to relax. What does that mean to say that women don't need to relax? So what women do to relax is they have a very close network. Women have close network of women who listen to each other, and their opinions count because they have people to engage with them and listen to them. And that's how women relax. So putting it this way, women are much better in adjusting and coping with stresses when they are surrounded by other women to lift them up. And that's why we need to put influencers, we need to put leaders, women in a leadership role in the network of women. And because that's what women do to boost each other help. They seem to need each other more to help themselves, boost themselves out. And therefore, you find that there is no need for women to smoke. We are trying very hard to help men out of smoking. We're trying to find other ways to help men relax. But women are doing it naturally. So there must be something else that men can also learn from women. So, put women out there as a leader. Women can help entice other women to perform, but women can also help men. So don't forget that we're not up there wanting leaders in a leadership role just to help other women and inspire other women, but also inspire men to be better people.
It is. Yes, well said, because really gender equality affects both men and women. It is really about breaking those privileges and the unevenness. And Alicia is saying in a comment saying that there needs to be a new narrative in which women in leadership are synergistic. Women and men are in a synergistic leadership in which showcase an inclusive society with women in community, women in family, and women in society. Precisely what you were saying, Dr. Imelda. I appreciate that. Okay, let me come very quickly to a question, or to follow up a question about the imbalances in academia. Early in our conversation, Dr. Adiba, you mentioned that perhaps women in leadership positions within the realm of academia have, there's some correcting that needs to be done with that imbalance. And I want to ask you about that, because there are a lot of women in academia, there are a lot of women in as students, as graduates, but how do we then make sure that women are also part of leadership and decision-making positions at every level of academia?
Yeah, so Melissa, I think the one thing is that we touched on earlier, women need to lift other women. And one way of doing that, as Dr. Yatela has shown this great program at Samdabi, is we do need to kind of be conscious about it, provide training, provide practical support. I'm you know, like the childcare I mentioned. But then we women ourselves also need to put ourselves forward. Maybe I'm being a bit stereotypical, but I think we women are less likely to use that phrase, lean in and offer ourselves about, especially in you know, Asian culture, tak nak tunjuk, you know, tak nak menonjol diri, you know, tak nak, you know, we kind of, we're very more self-effacing than men, I think. And so if there's a man and a woman in a room, you know, and we're less likely to say, okay, let me do it, you know, let me become the lead here, I think. So we women ourselves need to believe in that we can be who we want to be, and put ourselves forward.
Right, definitely. I do want to take this opportunity to just read a couple of comments, which I think is so interesting. I think it's hit a nerve to everyone here, the topic of childcare and the need for childcare to have some kind of universal childcare to help women progress. Oi Eileen says that I've been in early childhood education and care in Malaysia for almost 20 years. The cost of providing reliable, trustworthy, and developmentally appropriate childcare is very high. To date, there is no real plan or effort to make childcare universally available and affordable for every woman who needs it, regardless of that woman's situation. Also, a comment by Muja Nasser saying that that my sister had to forego her dream to build a career that commensurates with her degree, decided to stay on as a clerk mainly because of childcare issues. Childcare is expensive. Paling murah is 400 ringgit to 500 ringgit per child. Rather than send 3 or 4 children per family, they end up making the decision to quit the jobs and have a small family of 1 or 2 children. So this seems to be a fundamental issue to address, the issue of childcare. Perhaps, even though we're talking about it, perhaps we neglect to understand just how much it presents as a consideration for women when thinking about career advancements, particularly in taking up leadership positions. Would any one of the panelists be interested to weigh in on the issue of childcare?
You know, Melissa, let me say this. You know, a lot of people ask me, how do I do it? How do I juggle, you know, this career wearing many different hats? And the only reason I've been able to do it is because I have had, you know, family support, and alhamdulillah, we're able to afford childcare. And you know, when I look around me, there is no way I would have been able to do all that I do without that. So, you know, if the government is really serious about this, that is, like you said, the fundamental thing that needs to be provided. And because now we've got that double burden, not just childcare, we also have to look after our elderly parents. So a concerted effort, as you said.
Yeah, needs more attention. I think we need to talk about this way more and make the voices louder, and so that people will hear it. Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure that I leave a little bit of time at the end of our conversation just for each of you to give your takeaway message. The reason being is that the topic of today was about the action plan, what we can do to make sure that there are more women in leadership positions. I know there is a number attached, this 30% target, which is aspirational and wonderful, but it's really not just about corporations and boards. It's about every field, from healthcare, public health, civil society, academia, and at every level. Not just at the board level, but every level there needs to be representation of women's voices in decision making. So to get us there needs to be practical steps. There needs to be women leaders like yourself who shout about what it is that other women need. So maybe in the last the last couple of minutes that we have left, I can go round robin, get each of you to say what it is that you want our delegates today to take away with them, to work on, to implement in their lives and in their workplaces to help achieve this goal. I'm going to go to Dr. Yatila first. May I get you to give your takeaway message?
Institutionalized support is so important. That's ultimately it. It's the government, it's the organizations, it's laws and enforcement of those laws, and us accepting it as we go along, because that's the right way to go. And it's not only about, as you said, companies, so every organization, every field, science, sports, for example, look into those fields of male-dominated sports, cricket, rugby, football, that we need to focus on women development in those fields as well. And so it's institutionalized support. From the top to the bottom, every one of us have to work together towards the goal.
Okay, there you go. Dr. Imelda, can I very quickly get you to weigh in on your takeaway message? What would you like people to walk away with in terms of working on women's leadership today?
Well, I touched on it earlier, that what we want is people to change their mindset. Do not take individuals as men or women. See them as people with families. So there must be provision for each individual worker to raise their potentials to the top level by seeing them as part of a family, and that they do not have to, sacrifice. They don't need to have to sacrifice to become leaders. The institutions and organizations can help with provisions. No more free manpower like we had before. Where men had wives to look after all the chaos in a family. So actually the organizations had free manpower for the men to do the job. But things don't come for free anymore. You got to invest in families. You got to help with each individual worker to raise their potentials to the top by making provisions for family needs so they can focus, so they don't have to take so much time out to be with their families and then sacrifice. So that's my take-home message, is to change our mindset, to see people, each individual people as people with families, and for institutions and organizations to see it that way. Stop thinking that they can get free manpower.
I actually really love that. That's my takeaway message, to be completely honest with you, Dr. Milda. The idea that child care or care work is not a limitless commodity that can be used without cost or consequence and without sacrifice on somebody's part. So thank you for that. I appreciate that takeaway. May I come to Panorlela? Panorlela, what would you like our audience to take away with them today?
In HIV response, we have to build women leadership through investing in women leadership. We have a feminist school curriculum which help women to put their personal struggle into political context and support women to build skills and connect with other leaders as they have support. We also build women leadership through developing networks of women and connecting with women around the world to share information and stories about how to confront sexism and discrimination against women within the HIV response, and to understand the challenges facing women and to advocate for improvement. That's my
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Puan Nurlila, for that. And last but not least, Dr. Adiba, what's your takeaway message for us today?
Okay, I suppose let's once again make our voices heard and to demand for the institutional support that Dr. Yatila mentioned. It would be great if this would be a catalyst, at least amongst those women and men who are listening on this show, to start with demanding it at their own workplaces to start off with, and build a momentum to continue to demand it nationally. Secondly, I think for all the women listening, particularly those of you who are not yet in leadership position, believe in yourselves, believe that you can be there along with all those other men who are often not half as good as you anyway, and demand your seat at the table. Like I said before, we women tend to Asian women tend to let them go, let them take the seat. But no, I think it's time that we believe in ourselves and know that we're good as or better than some of them.
We should have seats at better tables.
Definitely. I want to thank all of you. Thank you so much. It's just been an absolute pleasure and an honor to chat with you this morning. And I appreciate your insights and for you sharing some of your very personal stories. And I appreciate that. And thank you so much for everyone attending today. We've got 91 participants. Thank you for being such an engaged audience, staying right till the end. I hope we get to meet again in future webinars. And on that note, you can kind of click on LINC at astroawani.com to find out what's coming up next. So this is my final goodbye. Thank you, everyone, today. Till we meet again, stay safe and be well. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you all.
Thank you.